Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to go through my top 10 books of 2022. In 2022, I read 121 books, and of those, I rated 22 5 stars. And looking back through them, there are some questionable picks there. I'm not really sure what I was thinking, but I kept them at the rating that they were because I thought, well, by the time I finished it, it was a 5-star at the time, so I'm just sticking with it. But yeah, definitely some questionable choices, which made picking my top 10 pretty easy. But yeah, let's get straight on into it. In at number 10, I'm cheating a little because it's a reread, but I preferred it so much more the second time round than the first time, so I feel like I have to include it because this is actually one of my favourite books of all time now, and that is The Heart Principle by Helen Huang. This book is fantastic, and I don't really know what I was thinking the first time I read this. I rated it 3 stars the first time, 5 stars the second, obviously. I think the thing is with it is that I went in with the completely wrong expectation. This is book 3 in the Kiss Quotient series, and the Kiss Quotient is my favourite romance of all time. And I expected this to be heavy on the romance, as the first 2 books are, but it definitely wasn't. This is definitely more like a general fiction, women's fiction, but with a romantic element to it. We follow Anna, who realises in this novel that she is autistic, and it's kind of like her story of self-discovery. She's learning all these new things about herself and viewing things in a completely different way. And in this time, she also meets Kwan, who is in the first 2 books, and I absolutely loved him in the first 2 books, which is I think why I wanted him to have like this amazing romance in this book. But like I say, this one's definitely more focused on Anna than it is him. However, he's still amazing in this book. In this, we also follow Anna's family. They experience family tragedy. Her father becomes really ill, and she is caring for him alongside her mum and sister. And the relationship that she has with her family is definitely strained. She doesn't particularly feel like she fits in with her family, and she doesn't particularly get on with them. So we go through her having to look after her father, who she absolutely loves, and she loves her family, but struggling because she doesn't particularly get on with them. But like I say, this does have a romantic element, and it's kind of Kwan and Anna realising that they definitely do like each other. They really hit it off from the offset. But with all this going on in Anna's life, it's really difficult for her to commit, and it's kind of just them fighting for love, fighting for their relationship, and it is just completely beautiful, heartbreaking. I cried so much. I tabbed this one a little bit. Yeah, absolutely loved it, and I've never related to a character more than Anna in this book. Some of the quotes in here just made me absolutely sob, so couldn't not include this one, even though it was a reread. But yeah, amazing, absolutely loved it. If you're thinking of picking this up and you've read the first 2, even if you haven't read the first 2, you could still read this one. But I definitely would recommend the first 2. It's fantastic, definitely give it a go. Loved it. In at number 9, we have got Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. Now, this one's quite funny because while I was reading this, I couldn't decide whether I loved it or hated it, and which seems quite bizarre considering it's now on my favourites list. But by the time I finished it, I did absolutely love it and rated it 5 stars. This one, we follow Frances and her best friend Bobby. They are both young students. They're 21 and they're in Dublin, and it's going through their life, what they're getting up to, but then they meet this married couple, Nick and Melissa, and it kind of explores the relationship that each of those 4 people have with one another. We're mainly following Frances and Nick, and it's hard to talk about without completely spoiling what happens, and I feel like you shouldn't know what's going on until you get into it. But there's definitely some strange dynamics there between all 4 of them, but also each pairing individually. If you put each pair of people together, they have completely different dynamics, and somehow it works in this book, and I absolutely loved it by the end. I feel like I really felt for Frances by the time we got to the end of the book. I didn't really like her at first, but like I say, grew to love her. Yeah, I just think that Sally Rooney's writing is fantastic. This has made me want to reread Normal People, actually, because when I first read that, I think I read it a couple of years ago, I rated that one 3 stars, and now I'm thinking about it, I think actually I might love that one even more on reread. So definitely going to give Normal People another shot. But yeah, not loads happens in this. It's mostly focused on those relationship dynamics and how each of them impact one another and their lives. And we're following Frances, so we're going through her life as well. But like I say, not a huge plot, but brilliant characters, brilliant writing, would definitely recommend. At number 8, I have picked Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Again, another one where the writing is absolutely incredible. I think Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing is probably my favourite out of any authors. I love her books. But out of the 4 newer novels that she's written that are in the same universe, this is probably my least favourite of those 4. But needless to say, it's still a favourite. And considering this book is about tennis and that I absolutely loved it, just goes to show that she could write anything and I would probably enjoy it. This one is about Carrie Soto, who is a tennis player, and she has the world record of Grand Slam wins, and this other tennis player is about to beat her record, and she decides to come back and retain her record. Now, it sounds like it could be pretty boring, but I promise you that it isn't. We follow her and her dad's relationship. Her dad is her coach, and her dad is probably my favourite character in this book because you can see the passion that he has, and it was just so lovely to read that he believed in her so much and was rooting for her completely and utterly. And yeah, it was just fantastic. I love the writing in this, as I say. The characters, I feel like Taylor Jenkins Reid writes such strong women, and it was just brilliant, like I say. Very sad, again, another one that made me cry. I feel like for it to be a favourite, it's got to make me cry. Not really. But yeah, I think this one was brilliant. And for Taylor Jenkins Reid to make me love a book that's about tennis, that's saying something. But yeah, this one was fantastic and obviously needed to be in my top 10. For number 7, I have gone for As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson, which I'm so pleased to say that I loved, because going into this one I was so apprehensive because I'd seen so many mixed opinions, and I understand why people don't like it. This book does take a turn, and if you've read this you will know what turn I'm talking about. But I loved it. I thought it was so action-packed and it was just brilliant. I think Holly Jackson writes YA thrillers so well, kept me on my toes the whole time, and it was completely unexpected. I really didn't think that it was going to go where it went, but it was brilliant. I can't really go into the plot massively in this because it is part of a series. It's the 3rd in the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. And I don't want to spoil this one before you've read the others. But I will say, in these books we follow Pip, who in the first book, she takes on this project as her last project of 6th form to uncover what really happened in this true crime case that happened in her area. She believes that it didn't happen in the way the police suggested, so she's going through the case, uncovering new information and presenting it in her final project. Such a good series. Obviously we figure out that case, the next book is a different case, and then this book takes a completely different turn, like I say, and I absolutely loved it. And I will say the last line of this book made me sob. I was, oh my god, I was so happy, but it so made me cry. And also I really thought that this book was going to go a certain way. I thought it was leading up to go a certain way, and I was like, absolutely not. That would have made me hate this, but I'm so pleased it didn't, and I absolutely loved it. I would 100% recommend this series. It is one of my favourite series of all time. If you're into thrillers, even if you don't think you'd like YA, give this a go because it is so good. Yeah, loved this, and I'm so pleased that I did. In number 6 we have got Book Lovers by Emily Henry, and this was my favourite romance of the year. Absolutely loved it. We follow Nora, who is this city girl. She lives in New York City and she's a literary agent, and our love interest is Charlie, who is a book editor, and when they first meet they don't get along, they don't hit it off, so it's not quite hate to love, but they dislike each other, I would say. So yeah, Nora's sister asks Nora to take a bit of time off work for them to have a bit of a getaway in this small town, and lo and behold, Charlie is also in this small town. I think that small town romances have actually become my favourite type of romance to read, so the fact that this incorporated that was definitely a big tick for me. I love the setting of a small cosy town where everyone knows everyone. I just think it's really cute and adds a kind of found family aspect to these romance novels, which I just think is so lovely. But yeah, we follow Nora and Charlie as their relationship and romance ensues, and we also get to know this cute small town, and it's just, yeah, like I say, it's just completely lovely. Really enjoyed it, and I think that Nora is one of my favourite characters I've read because I find her quite relatable. She definitely gives big sister vibes. I think if you are an older sister, as I am, you will completely relate to her because she just wants what's best for her sister, and her heart's completely in the right place, but sometimes it's just not the right thing to do. So yeah, found Nora completely relatable. Absolutely loved Charlie. He was so charming, and their relationship and their chemistry was just out of this world. 100% my favourite romance of the year, and I can't wait for Emily Henry's new book coming out in 2023. I'm so excited, and I'll be reading it immediately. For my number 5 spot, I have included a whole series because I couldn't pick one of the series, and I feel like with this series I kind of see them as a whole thing because I read them one after another, and that is the Heartstopper series. I absolutely love these graphic novels. We follow Nick and Charlie, and Charlie is an openly gay boy at school, and Nick is coming to terms with the fact that he thinks he is bisexual, and it follows Nick and Charlie's relationship. It is just absolutely adorable. I feel like you can't read this without having a massive smile on your face, but it also does cover some pretty serious topics as well. I think teenagers should absolutely read this. It is 100% relatable, and I absolutely loved it. I also loved the TV show. I can't believe I only read these this year. I've read through all of them twice this year because I love them so much. I feel like if I need a little bit of a pick-me-up, these are definitely the books to go for. But yeah, Nick and Charlie's relationship is just stunning. I absolutely loved it, and I think these are characters, all the characters in here are going to be characters that stick with me for a really long time. And like I say, I think all teenagers should read this because I think there is something in there for everyone to relate to. It's just fantastic, absolutely brilliant, and I loved this series. But yeah, like I said, I can't pick just one, and because I read these all in one go both times that I read it, I can't really differentiate between the 4 of them as to pick my favourite. I just love the whole Heartstopper story as a whole. So yeah, this series is my number 5. Number 4 is Take It Back by Kia Abdullah, and this book I didn't think would be topped. I read this in March and thought it was absolutely fantastic. We follow Zara, who works in victim support, but she used to be a lawyer. And she has this girl come into her office, and this girl has facial disfigurements and is disabled, and she comes in and says that these 4 Muslim boys sexually assaulted her and raped her. And Zara, being Muslim herself, has to grapple with the fact that she believes this girl, but pursuing this case and helping this girl is going to set her community against her, and that's what this whole book is primarily about. We even follow Zara as her own family go against her for making the decision to support this girl. But the thing is about this, the thing that I loved the absolute most was the fact that I had no idea. Obviously, you know, it either happened or it didn't. And Kia Abdullah does such a good job of keeping you guessing. Like, I really had no idea. Like, one minute I thought it happened, the next minute I was like, no, I don't think it did. And it completely shocked me, even though obviously you know it's one or the other. It's not a massive plot twist, but it still felt like it was. It was absolutely fantastic. I would say if you don't particularly like a courtroom drama kind of book, then maybe avoid this one because that is a huge part of this book. That takes up quite a lot of the book. But I really liked that. Again, like I say, that part is what kept me guessing the whole time. I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. So well written. and yeah, 100% recommend it. It's one of my favourite thrillers of all time. It was brilliant. So my number 3 book is a book that's actually quite difficult to talk about, and it is Saving Noah by Lucinda Berry. Now, while this was phenomenal in my opinion and definitely a favourite book of all time, I wouldn't recommend this book to everyone, and once you know the subject matter I think you'll understand why. But in this book we are following Noah, who is, I think he's about 16, and he has got paedophilic disorder. We mainly follow his mother's perspective as she comes to learn this about her son, and we go through the emotions of her realising that this is what her son has done. He has these thoughts and feelings while still loving her son. She can't just abandon him. She still completely loves him. He is her child. And it's going through all those difficult emotions and conversations that she has to have with her son, and knowing that she completely disagrees with what he's done, but she still loves him and she wants to help him. And so yeah, that takes up the majority of this book, but we also get other chapters of Noah, the teenage boy, in this home where he's kind of being rehabilitated and receiving therapy for this disorder that he has. This book does a really good job of making you feel empathy for every character involved. You feel empathy obviously for the children that were affected and their parents, but you also feel empathy for Noah's mother. You feel completely sorry for her, but then you also kind of have this empathy towards Noah himself, because he very clearly doesn't want to be having these feelings, but he can't help himself, and it is so upsetting. It is completely heartbreaking, and it kind of really puts that thought into your head of, what would you do if you were in this mother's situation? How would you react? And I just thought it was so thought-provoking, and it was brilliant. I loved it so much, but like I say, it is so difficult to recommend. I wouldn't recommend this to anyone, simply because of the fact you don't know what people have gone through, and you would never want to unknowingly trigger them, because this is very intense subject matter that not everyone would want to read. But if you think you could handle that, I would definitely recommend it, because I think it was so well written, and it does a really good job of putting you in the perspective of multiple people that are involved in this kind of situation that Noah's family are going through, because we also follow Noah's dad, who is completely against it and doesn't want anything to do with his son anymore. So like I say, yeah, we have completely different perspectives in this, but it is fantastic. Only read this book if you think you can handle it, because it's a hard read. I will say that it is difficult to get through, but brilliant nonetheless. Now we are in my top 2 books, and my number 2 is Emma by Jane Austen. I absolutely adored this book, and I was very apprehensive going into this one yet again, because classics, I find them very intimidating, and I struggle to read them. And while this one did take me a long time to get through and required a lot of my attention, it was still brilliant. I feel like it doesn't really need much of an explanation of plot, because most people have read this. It's a very popular classic. It's Jane Austen. But yeah, a lot of people dislike Emma as a character, and I don't understand why, because I think she's great. I think she's definitely flawed, but I think that makes her more entertaining, and you really see the growth in her from beginning to end. And yeah, I just absolutely loved it. I loved the whole cast of characters. There wasn't a single character that I disliked or thought was unnecessary to the plot. Some of them were annoying, but that was the whole intention. But yeah, I think this book is brilliant. It's definitely up there. This, I think, could be my favourite classic now that I've read. This or Little Women, they're both probably on par with one another, but absolutely loved it. And it's made me want to read more classics, which is exciting, because like I say, I find them intimidating to read. I don't particularly pick them up very often because I feel like I'm going to struggle through them, but the fact that I know that I can get through this and absolutely fall in love with it has definitely made me want to try more in 2023. And now we have reached my favourite book of the year, which is Writers and Lovers by Lily King. This book was stunning. This is the only book that I've ever finished and wanted to reread immediately once I'd finished it. I absolutely loved it. We follow Casey, whose mother has recently died, and the exploration of grief in this is just fantastic. I know that grief is a very subjective emotion and feeling, but the way it was written in here related to my own sense of grief that I have experienced in the past. So reading this, it was very intense. And the fact that it's about her mum as well, I'm so close with my mum that it just broke my heart reading this. It was so good. So Casey is completely lost. She's 31 years old and feels like she's going nowhere in her life. She's trying to write her novel and has been trying to write it for the past 6 years, and she's just getting nowhere with it. And she just feels completely lost in life. She meets these two men, Silas and Oscar, and both men are completely different and would take her life into a completely different route depending on who she picked. So this is a love triangle, which I usually can't stand. And the fact that I loved this book so much when that is a main aspect of the novel just goes to show how brilliant it is. So Silas in this, him and Casey do have a lot in common. They get on so well to begin with, but then he disappears for a few weeks. And in that time, she meets Oscar, who comes into the restaurant that she works with his two sons. So like I say, Oscar and Silas are very different. Oscar is a father, he's a family man, and Silas is the complete opposite. And you kind of got to see the different routes her life would take while she's exploring both situations, if that makes sense. Obviously, if she ended up with Oscar, she would have these two young boys to help raise, and the two boys were absolutely lovely in this book. They were so cute, and her relationship with them as well was so cute. I thought that was a really nice aspect of this book. But then yeah, obviously we have Silas, who is the complete opposite. He's quite flighty. He will just go off and do his own thing. He doesn't really have anyone else to think about, and so you can really see the difference in these two men, and it's following Casey as she tries to decide what she wants from her life, but also finding herself in the process, and also trying to write this novel that she has so desperately been trying to write for years. This was absolutely amazing. I loved the writing in this. I didn't have any tabs, so I don't know if you can see, but I folded down so many pages, and I'm sorry to those who hate dog-earing pages, but these are all pages that I want to annotate when I come around to rereading it. Yeah, all quotes that I absolutely fell in love with. This book it's definitely a contender for favourite of all time, to be honest. When I read it, I was like, is this my new favourite book ever? I'm not sure. I think I need to reread it to decide, but I found it fantastic. I loved it so much. So yeah, definitely deserves to be in my #1 spot and is without a doubt my favourite book of this year. So there we have it. Those were my top 10 books of 2022. Let me know if you've read any of those and what you thought of them, and let me know your favourite book of 2022 as well. I would love it if you could like this video and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!